Hi, I'm Lexi, Creative Board Co-Director at WMRE, and tonight we're here with Michael Dehn.
Hi, I'm Michael. I write and record music under the name MJ Dehn on Spotify and every other streaming service.
And you have a radio show with us too, and you want to plug that?
I do. It's called Dehn's List. It is 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. on Wednesday nights every week. I have friends on sometimes. I play music. We might play our own music later.
Wait, are there any projects that you're working on right now?
I live with my roommates, Ashton and Alex, and we just bought a whole lot of new equipment so we can start our own studio in our basement.
That's so cool.
We're starting to record a lot of stuff soon. Well, I will say I don't have sort of a concrete idea of what I want to do next. We got like a lot of ideas floating around, and I'm very excited.
Super cool. I think you mentioned earlier that you're working as a solo artist right now.
Mm-hmm.
Are you looking to start another band with your roommates?
They actually they're starting a band, Ashton and Alex and our friend Audrey, called Possums, and they make really cool music, so shout out Possums. But I am also looking for a band, so if there's any Emory people that want to start one, please let me know.
So you prefer working in a band than as like a solo artist?
Absolutely, for like so many reasons. Mainly just because I get way less nervous when I'm playing with other people, which is one thing, and also I think part of why I love music so much is just to feel that energy between other people, and it's not just like me kind of like saying things. Mm-hmm. I need that kind of support, and it's way more fun.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us a little bit about your creative process?
People do it differently. I always start with music. It's usually a little thing that I play on my guitar or on my piano, and then throughout the week, usually when I'm driving, honestly, thoughts will come to me when I'm driving. I try to keep in my head, and when I get home, I put them down in my notes app. So my songs are very often combinations of things that I have down in my notes app from words, and then play on my guitar when I get home. But the best ones, like my favorite songs, have ones that came to me both in melody and in words at the same time, which is just a purely spontaneous thing that I can't replicate.
Do you want to talk about those songs and like how you felt creating them?
It's almost really poetry at this point, because on my notes app, because I think that lines are cool, but they never become songs until I have a melody. I would say my favorite songs I've ever written are probably called Sweater and A Soul Anyway. The first one, actually, I really don't think is representative of how I normally write. It was the one that came to me that felt the most songy. You know, I had this like da-da-da-da pop in my head, and then the words just happened in a way that it usually doesn't happen and usually takes me time to write. And with A Soul Anyway, that came out of just like a little 2-bar like da-na-na-na-na-na thing that I played on my guitar. And then I realized when I put syllables to that thing, just the words that I wrote down were just the ones that made sense to me, and I think were the ones that required just the littlest editing.
So what's your favorite thing about being a musician? Is it emotional? Like, I'm an artist as well, and I always love being able to just express myself.
The reason that music is my favorite thing ever is because it adds kind of like a third dimension to expression that I don't think can be achieved in that many other mediums. You know, like, I can say something and how I'm saying it is just my tone, right? But if you added the notes to it, people derive different meanings from like what notes I'm saying them with, and that sort of, I can be angry. Then if I sing something angry, everyone feels that too. I guess if that makes sense. You know?
I think that's something I love about film as well myself. I always do experimental work that is very rhythmic and like montage for similar reasons. What made you decide to want to make music?
I had been playing music just in different cover bands at home and in high school and stuff. It wasn't until COVID actually, hit. That's when I really started writing music. I think, formed a really tight circle of friends, and I felt comfortable sharing my music with those friends. Then I went abroad for a semester, and I was just kind of very by myself for the first time ever, which led to me writing a whole lot more. And then I went to school, with the first month of which was all remote. And I was one of the only people on campus at Oxford, which led to me writing a lot more. So it's kind of just been these periods of weirdness a little bit. And I think music is how I express those periods of weirdness.
That was beautifully put, but I can definitely understand why, like, you miss being in a band, like that collaborativeness and connection.
Yeah. It really is that, like, I don't think there's a better feeling. Like, the moment, like, a note hits between two people at the same time, and we're like, oh my god, that was awesome. That can't happen when you're by yourself.
Are there any artists that you think you sound like for new listeners?
I like to think that I sound like a lot of different artists, only if that's because I don't try to stick to one thing. But I have been told that my voice does kind of sound like two of my favorite artists, which are Pine Grove and Car Seat Headrest, which for me is a huge compliment because their voices have really shaped my lyrics and how I express myself vocally. I would say the majority of my songs lean a little sad. When making my first record, I listened to a lot of Phoebe Bridgers, a lot of Pine Grove, a lot of Hosier. I don't know if that came across in my writing, but those are some of my favorite people.
Would you say they're also your biggest inspirations?
I would say yes, and then also throw in some like Ben Folds, Jeff Buckley, Hosier, Ben Folds, Billy Joel, and Pine Grove. I
don't think that you should talk down about yourself either. I think that sometimes the difference between a successful person and an unsuccessful person is a matter of outlook. Sorry, that's not an interview question, but just... As a multi-instrumentalist, how do you create your arrangements?
Ooh, I like this one. I always do drums first, only because with a beat and a feel, that kind of establishes the tone for a song going first. After that, is bass. But then everything else is sort of, and this is something that I kind of learned when I took oddly a fiction writing class, is just kind of the importance of intention in songwriting. And just because every little thing you play is now in that song, and if you don't change it, it'll be there forever. There are some songs that I go into, like A Soul Anyway, with a very clear vision of what I want it to sound like. And there are others, like Sculpted 2, which is a sequel, kind of another song. And I had no idea what that was gonna sound like when I went into the studio in my friend's basement to record it. But I'm really happy with how it turned out because I realized, I can put bongos in this. This can be acoustic and drums. It doesn't have to have something else. We can put a trombone at the end, I like all those things to happen organically.
I like that. Very hands-on and also kind of crafty, but I feel like you can really feel that spirit in your music.
Thank you. Something that I've really wanted to try is the singing saw, which I've yet to try, but it's you take a saw and then you bow it, and it goes like... And I will I'll break laws to get that in a song coming up. I really want to. Emory as a concept probably as a whole has probably been the biggest influence on my writing, only because I started at Oxford, and Oxford is a bit of, depending on who you ask, either the best, or the worst thing about Oxford is that it's a bubble, and you run into the same people all the time, and everyone knows everyone. I think the transition from Oxford to here is that now, being here, I have to make a conscious effort to see the people that I want to see more. Whereas at Oxford, I could run into someone at the dining hall or literally just walking in the path that we walk 3 times a week. So I think when you're talking about how I prefer the collaboration, I prefer having friends behind me when I make music.
It sounds like Emory, main campus, is a little more isolating than Oxford. So I feel like it might be harder to foster that community of just dedicated musicians that you were talking about before. I
think that the main campus's proximity to Atlanta is huge for me personally, because I do feel so much closer to the music scene that I'd have to drive 2-hour round trip if there's traffic at Oxford to get closer to. I would be surrounded before kind of by nature. I now have to find the nature. I have to find those moments of peace as opposed to them kind of happening upon me when I'm in a busier place.
Are those moments of peace really important for your music process?
I do think my best writing has come out of the times where I have taken a beat in the midst of the craziness to go off, whether that's into the woods next to Oxford or into the staircase of the music building, and take a look at my notes app and kind of reflect on what that means to me right now.
Do you feel like the Emory community fosters musical creativity?
I do think the Emory community fosters musical creativity, because I have met some really talented musicians here. I do look at other schools sometimes, especially schools of kind of like our like size and like aura, like Cornell, and they have like regularly like indie artists and bands come visit them. And I do feel like from a professional standpoint, I'm not seeing the kind of creativity in connection to the Atlanta scene that we could. It's events like, like Symposium and like Table Talks, like Coachella, and now we have this, which is awesome, and I hope you do this every year. I do think that we are in a really sort of unique place in the Atlanta community, and the influence we could have going forward, I think, could make a difference. And I will say this, actually. I've been, for a journalism class, I've been writing about, Railroad Earth, which is the venue owned by Neil Freed right next to Emory and Emory Village, and it's kind of the last of its kind. There used to be the Dugout, which closed in the 90s, where like the Indigo Girls had their first ever gigs. It's now a Chipotle, and a Buffalo Wild Wings. For someone who never experienced that era, it's kind of sad, I think, to see that. And I would love to bring back some of that energy.
It almost feels to me like everything became a little bit more corporate, including the students. What do you feel like what are some things that you'd like change if you could? What do you think Emory can do to make this better?
I love what Emory Musicians Network has done recently. I do think there's been an upspring in like sort of even just it having the group me for people to make connections. That's huge. I do think I'd like to see student bands, student performances facilitated on a more like structural level than it is, I think, than kids in the Musicians Network feel like they have to do all that work themselves. What do I do to change it? I don't know. I don't know. But I do think Emory could probably do more to attract the kind of people that want to make that happen. Admin has probably facilitated that change a little more, probably because that's what draws the big bucks. I would like to see Emory probably invest in its music and its arts a little more.
Like WMRE, I think that's something that we've talked about doing a lot, like trying to get more student life, and that's why we're doing the Tiny Couch. There's so much bureaucracy that makes it almost impossible. It feels targeted, almost.
Yeah. Like even you walk into a building like Rich, then you walk into the B school, and you're like, it feels like we're living in two different worlds in terms of investment.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add?
Please make a band with me. I really want one. No, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding.
Thank you so much. I feel like you put a lot of thought and like emotion into your answers, and it's really cool to break down the, genius behind the craft. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm MJ Dehn. I will be performing at the first ever WMRE Tiny Couch event on March 30th at 7 p.m., which you can live stream at www.wmre.live. Turn us on.
Turn us on.